Hello everyone, I am back with another viewer-suggested video. This time we'll be taking a look at the 5 most common mistakes I think disc priests make in a raid setting. Some of these things might be contextual to a Mirdrasil, but most should be applicable in the war within and going forward hopefully. Alright, so let's move into the biggest and most common problem I see when doing log reviews, and I think this is overcapping on radiance charges. When I made my last video, I showed roughly how you can plan your radiances for a fight, and I think this is a very useful tool to avoid this problem. But most log reviews I've done sit on their radiance charges, wasting them when they could have cycled them to hit another damage dealing mechanic, not using those radiances in anxiety that it will not be back for their main ramps. I think the solution to this is quite simple, but it takes some work. And it's what I said at the beginning. You need to plan a fight beforehand. Make sure you know where your radiances can be used, such that you don't end up stepping on the toes of your larger ramps when you're cycling those radiances. But also making sure that you're not wasting any radiances either. And it's important to remember that the reason this is so important is because it's our most powerful atonement applying tool. Along with the fact that it does anywhere from 500k to 1 million healing on its own. So don't waste those radiance charges, super important. Alright, moving on to the second most common mistake. And this one is messing up important cast sequences or prioritizing the wrong spells. This one is quite broad, so I'll try to narrow it down a little bit here. Disc Priest's first penance in the larger 2 Radiance ramp is our highest damaging ability by quite a large margin. And the reason for this is because of Harsh Discipline, Dark Indulgence, coupled with the fact that inside our pet window our penance turns into Dark Reprimand and does much higher damage through Shadow Covenant, and transfers more atonement healing through Abyssal Reverie. And I see something happen a lot that really shreds this big burst we have available to us, where people will use penance into Mind Blast, losing out on Dark Indulgence, giving us Power from the Dark Side to our penance, which is a 50% damage boost, and losing out on Schism on the target, which is a 10% additional boost. And sometimes these mistakes happen obviously due to movement, and the player has to press penance to deal with a knockback or dodging mechanics. But figuring out those parts of a fight, such that you are casting this sequence correctly, is a huge deal. And I want to throw in a little side note for Mirdrasil as well, is that remember to cast Smite once you've used your more powerful spells inside your pet windows. Our Forset gives us double cooldown reduction through Void Summoner. That helps a lot with getting your pets back up for your next ramp. Moving on to number 3. This one is much more personal. You will see many players do this, even at a world first level. I'm talking about combining Rapture and Evangelism. I personally think this is lazy, and the difference from doing this and not doing it is probably not that high. But I think being lazy when playing Discipline Priest is especially bad, given how fun it is to explore different ways to approach a fight. The argument good players use here is exactly laziness, which is fine, but my response to this choice in general is this. Evangelism is probably, if not absolutely, the single strongest healer cooldown in the game currently. Inside that window, Disc Priests can do some absolutely absurd throughput. I have not found myself needing more healing inside an Evangelism window yet. The only thing Rapture does is take away healing from your Evangelism through shields, when your Evangelism is strong enough to do that healing anyway. Moving onwards again to number 4, falling apart later on in a fight. This one is hard to tackle, but lots of logs I've looked at have fallen apart later on in the fight, in a way that makes them play Disc almost like a Holy Priest, reacting to damage and using Radiance only reactively. This is something people will already know is bad, and the problem here is how to fix it. So I will share some tips I use to get my mind to focus and reestablish some structure in the fight. And I've used many tools to try to help keep my fight structured, but I think the most common process Disc Priests face is that they're dealing with a mechanic and they are not looking at their timers. They miss their ramp, then desperately try and fix it, but far too late. There are tons of ways to fix this, but I think moving your bigwigs or DBM timers or your case weak aura to a space on your UI that lets you access your timers while you're doing mechanics is one really easy way. Sadly, I think that the best way to deal with this is by doing something that I would call deeper introspection after a pull. So what I mean by this is that usually when this happens, people kind of just end that pull, they're mad at themselves. Instead, start thinking differently if you can. Try to think of like when you were struggling, why were you struggling, what can you do to help this problem? If a mechanic is making it difficult for you to focus on your ramp, is it worth perhaps not going as wide with that ramp? Kind of allowing you less globals and structuring that ramp to get some muscle memory as you progress. I think every spec in this game benefits from thinking about how you can improve after a pull, but I think Disc Priests get such excessive punishment for mistakes that it's really hard to stay productive when doing so. I think people get upset and angry at themselves. But remember to think about how you can solve that problem. Let your mind learn how to deal with that mechanic while you're ramping. Don't be mad at yourself. And lastly, number 5. Poor movement planning. This one is something you can notice a lot on fights like Nimue and Smolderon, but it's been a thing for Disc Priests in almost every tier. Understanding when you need to plant and when you can move as a Disc Priest is crucial to hitting your ramps and not griefing your guild. A good example here is Nimue. If you are dodging lines but planning your Radiance globals poorly, you can end up getting stunned and losing atonement uptime. But even on Nimue there are ways to deal with this. Be aware while you are ramping and you're still applying your instant atonements that you're about to need to plant and that your movement should work to let you plant in a few seconds. This is true for Smoldron as well, where you should be planning to be able to plant for your Radiances ahead of time. Basically what I'm saying is tons of mechanics demand us to move and dodge, but mastering how to deal with this properly is part of Disc Priest. It's not the game's fault, it's on you. And to reference the last point as well, introspection helps a lot here too. Think about how you can deal with movement on a fight, even if it's difficult. You can do this. Alright. That's the 5 most common mistakes I've seen doing log reviews over the past few weeks. If you have questions about any of my solutions to these problems or struggle with something else, feel free to let me know. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the video. And sorry that the release cadence has been a bit slow. Raiding in 2 guilds and having a day job makes releasing videos in a pace I'd like to very difficult. Thanks for watching though, and see you in the next one.